Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our last episode, we discussed the intense situation where Rimuru, fueled by anger over the storm dragon being dominated by the Empire, led his subordinates into a life-or-death battle against the Empire. Rimuru's opponents were the world's apex true dragons, the Scorched Dragon Velgrynd and the Storm Dragon Veldora. During the battle, Lord of Wisdom, who had been providing strategic calculations, began doubting herself due to repeated miscalculations, seemingly influenced by external interference. Rimuru, aware of this, sought to reassure her and bestowed upon her a formal name, Ciel. Consequently, Lord of Wisdom awakened into Mana Ciel, transforming from a mere skill into an independent consciousness, fighting alongside her master, Rimuru-sama. In this episode, we will delve into how Rimuru endeavors to free the storm dragon Veldora and his subsequent evolution into a true dragon. Let's get started. Following the birth of Ciel, Rimuru now possessed two independent consciousnesses within him. Faced with the challenge of confronting two true dragons, Rimuru decided to have Ciel take on the Scorched Dragon while he focused on freeing the storm dragon. Thus, the battle commenced. The Scorched Dragon unleashed its burning breath in an attempt to test Rimuru's strength, but Ciel remained unfazed, easily blocking the attack with the Lord of Oath's ability, Absolute Guard. Velgrynd was surprised, as even the primordial demons could not withstand the burning breath unscathed. Rimuru's casual handling of the attack indicated complete resistance to heat-based assaults. To confirm her theory, Velgrynd launched another attack, utilizing parallel existence to create 11 copies of herself and simultaneously release nuclear cannon, followed by consecutive bursts of burning breath. This combined assault of 22 rays, powerful enough to destroy a small planet, converged on Rimuru. Yet, Rimuru made no move to escape, and a final shield appeared, minimally deflecting all the damage as if perfectly calculated. Velgrynd grew frustrated. Even if these attacks were ineffective, defending against them should have drained energy, yet Rimuru showed no signs of fatigue. This implied that her offensive efforts were merely depleting her own magicule reserves in vain. On the other side of the battlefield, Rimuru, after a brief glance at Velgrynd, turned his entire focus towards Veldora, completely disregarding Velgrynd as if she posed no threat at all. What was most notable was Rimuru's approach to Veldora's attacks, primarily evading and only resorting to forceful defense when absolutely necessary. In contrast, Velgrynd's attacks were met with a mere light shield from Rimuru, a seemingly casual and perfunctory defense. While this difference was largely due to Rimuru and Ciel's varying proficiency in defensive tactics, to Velgrynd, it felt like mockery. In an instant, the proud Velgrynd, while harboring resentment towards Rimuru, channeled the supportive effects of her ultimate skill, Lord of Charity, to their maximum, pushing her powers to the limit. She then unleashed her mightiest secret technique, Cardinal Acceleration, crafted to defeat the Frost Dragon Velzard. The destructive wave surged towards Rimuru at speeds thousands of times faster than sound, a technique infusing all of Velgrynd's latent potential, capable of disintegrating any matter into dust. Velgrynd was confident in its unbeatable speed, expecting no chance for Rimuru to react, let alone survive. However, when Velgrynd saw Rimuru standing unscathed calmly in place, she doubted her own sight. She couldn't fathom how her ultimate technique, which could potentially be fatal even to Guy or Velzard, had failed to harm Rimuru. Confronted with this incomprehensible reality, Velgrynd's anxiety escalated. In reality, the attack Velgrynd had unleashed was indeed potent enough to obliterate Rimuru, and it was executed with terrifying speed. Even previous Lord of Wisdom might have struggled to calculate an optimal defense in such a brief span. However, Rimuru's partner was now Ciel, a Manas of the highest caliber, capable of instantaneously discerning the essence of an enemy's skill. Ciel promptly activated Lord of Gluttony, isolating the wave of destruction in the imaginary space, essentially Rimuru's stomach, where they could slowly absorb its energy, effectively neutralizing the attack. With Ciel's assistance, the imaginary space of Lord of Gluttony became an even more robust defense mechanism than Lord of Oath, absolute guard. The reality was that even Rimuru hadn't fully grasped the danger of the attack before it was already neutralized, hence his pretense that everything was proceeding according to plan, provoking Velgrynd by claiming such a simplistic move was easy to consume. On the other hand, Velgrynd, unable to comprehend Rimuru's words, fell into a state of bewilderment, creating a potentially fatal lapse in her defense. Rimuru commented, with a hint of apology, that Velgrind's self-assured attack had backfired, but reminded her that they were still in the midst of battle. As Rimuru finished speaking, Ciel immediately set to work. Unnoticed by Velgrynd, layered magic circles began to form around her, constructing what Ciel designed as the insulated prison, combining infinity prison and insulated space. In this space, every variable, temperature, humidity, gravity, even heartbeats, was under Ciel's computational control. No matter what Velgrynd attempted, escape was impossible. This tactical mastery showcased not only Rimuru's evolution in terms of power but also his strategic acumen, bolstered significantly by Ciel's integration. The dynamics of the battlefield had shifted dramatically, with Rimuru not just defending but now also controlling the flow of the fight, demonstrating his newfound prowess and positioning himself advantageously against one of the mightiest beings in their world. All because of Ciel. Subsequently, Rimuru casually remarked that Velgrynd should patiently wait in the prison he had created for her while he went to free Veldora, effectively declaring Velgrind's defeat. Being trapped so effortlessly by Rimuru filled Velgrynd with immense humiliation. However, Velgrynd didn't concede defeat. She still had one more card to play. Using her parallel existence still beside of Rudra on the airship, she planned to quietly transfer all her magicule to that body. To avoid detection by Rimuru, she had to transfer her power gradually, bit by bit. Enduring this indignity, Velgrynd cautiously proceeded, unaware that all of this was part of Ciel's strategy. The focus then shifted back to Rimuru. According to Ciel, the insulated prison could be maintained for 200 seconds, meaning they could completely ignore Velgrynd during this period. With this understanding, Rimuru issued the command to join forces with Ciel to free Veldora. Having regained his composure after the initial emotional turmoil over losing Veldora, Rimuru set about this task. However, he still hadn't figured out a viable method to free Veldora. Dominating a true dragon, a top-tier spiritual entity, in such a short time frame was an incredibly challenging feat. The only approach Rimuru could think of was forced domination, seizing control of the body first, and then gradually wresting away the independent consciousness. Hoping that Veldora's will had not been completely overridden, Rimuru decided to try awakening Veldora's dormant consciousness by shouting at him. So, entrusting the defense to Ciel, Rimuru flew in front of Veldora and began calling out to him. But Veldora showed no response, immediately retaliating with a thunderstorm attack. Frustrated, Rimuru couldn't help but punch Veldora. Reflecting on his actions, Rimuru realized that in order to awaken Veldora, physical blows might be as effective as verbal attempts. Thus, he began to pummel Veldora's face with all his might, occasionally throwing in kicks for good measure, yet Veldora continued to respond only with roars and counterattacks. At that moment, Ciel suggested using predation to seal Veldora into the imaginary space. As their attacks had been ineffective, Ciel proposed this daunting strategy. If they could seal Veldora in the stomach, they could slowly analyze and eventually release him, much like they had done previously. Rimuru activated Lord of Gluttony, attempting to completely swallow Veldora. It was then that he heard a voice he thought he would never hear again, Veldora's voice. This communication between the two cores became possible because Rimuru had begun the process of consuming Veldora, closing the distance between them significantly. Veldora, in his typically dramatic way, admitted a slight failure and asked for understanding. He explained that, in the urgency of the moment, he had hurriedly separated his core from his body. Although he was unable to speak, he had managed to preserve his sense of self. Veldora's explanation cleared up Rimuru's confusion. While happy that Veldora was safe, Rimuru was simultaneously frustrated and voiced his complaints. He pointed out that Veldora should be focusing on reclaiming his body rather than engaging in leisurely chats. Veldora responded that he would have done so if it were possible, and remarked that Rimuru should be more composed in such situations. Rimuru retorted that he would never have recklessly faced two true dragons if it were not for Veldora. He began to air his grievances to Veldora. Veldora panicked a bit at this, quickly assuring Rimuru that he would do his best to assist. Though his promise lacked certainty, merely hearing Veldora's voice helped calm Rimuru's emotions. Rimuru expressed relief that Veldora was safe, which was all that mattered. Veldora, ever the jester, explained to Rimuru that it was he who had severed the soul corridor, so he didn't consider himself defeated by the Empire. He also expressed his indignation that his sister Velgrynd had allied with Emperor Rudra and Tatsuya Kondo to target him, deeming their methods disgraceful. Faced with a jovial storm dragon, Rimuru felt somewhat foolish but maintained the importance of vigilance on the battlefield. However, when Veldora explained that he had severed the soul corridor to protect Rimuru, fearing that Rudra's control might extend to him, Rimuru's anger was doused by a wave of emotion. Rimuru then assured Veldora that he would handle the rest. Veldora expressed his trust in Rimuru's abilities. With the situation of the storm dragon fully assessed, the solution was straightforward: fully consume the present storm dragon form, retrieve his core, and then resurrect him using Lord of Storm. The challenge was to avoid damaging Veldora's core, given its unstable state. Therefore, Rimuru needed to weaken Veldora gradually before consumption. With Ciel's assistance, Rimuru, now in his slime form, expanded and began to encroach upon the storm dragon's body, simultaneously activating soul gluttony in an attempt to locate the core. Contrarily, Veldora fiercely resisted, recklessly endangering his own life in an attempt to annihilate Rimuru. Rimuru experienced intense burning and pain, unlike typical creatures that become energy to replenish him when consumed. The body with dragon factor resisted any bondage. Far from becoming a power source, this energy started ravaging Rimuru's normally pain-insensitive slime body. The extreme heat triggered alarm signals throughout his body, stirring primal survival instincts. Despite the agony, Rimuru steadily expanded his form, accelerating the erosion process. Desperately, Rimuru urged Ciel to find the core and rescue Veldora before Velgrynd could escape the insulated prison. After receiving an affirmative response from Ciel, Rimuru calmed down. Ciel then casually mentioned she had analyzed additional abilities due to having much free time, and inquired if Rimuru wanted to hear about them. Rimuru was somewhat speechless at Ciel's nonchalance, given his own suffering. Ciel explained that she had analyzed Veldora's abilities and Velgrind's skill, cardinal acceleration, within the insulated prison, and had grasped their principles, making the development of similar skills possible. According to Ciel, she had also deciphered Storm Blast, and with Rimuru's possession of ultimate skill Lord of Storm, recreating the Storm Dragon's ultimate technique was also feasible. Rimuru was startled by Ciel's capabilities, which evidently exceeded his expectations. However, Ciel then announced the main attraction: she had completed the analysis and appraisal of the Storm Dragon currently being consumed, making it possible to transform Rimuru's body into that of a true dragon. Casually, Ciel inquired whether Rimuru wished to proceed with the true dragon transformation. This prompted an involuntary laugh from Rimuru. It seemed almost absurd that Ciel would ask such a question after achieving so much. With a mix of amusement and resolve, Rimuru issued a firm yes. Instantaneously, the agony that had entwined him vanished. The draconic aura of the storm dragon ceased to affect him. This was because Rimuru himself could now wield draconic aura. Under Rimuru's relentless consumption, even a true dragon became just another creature whose devouring could augment his strength. Thus, Rimuru's magical level soared, reaching such heights that it sparked concerns of a potential loss of control or rampage. However, Ciel reassured him calmly, promising perfect management of the situation. With Ciel's expertise, such worries were needless. Gradually, Rimuru's magical quantity kept increasing, eventually matching and then surpassing that of the storm dragon Veldora, breaking through all previous limits. At this pivotal moment, Veldora's laughter echoed, brimming with pride and joy. He proclaimed his trust in Rimuru, reveling in the victory. Veldora boasted as if he had nurtured Rimuru himself, although he had played no direct role in this particular triumph. Ignoring Veldora's victorious boasts, Rimuru unleashed the Lord of Gluttony upon the storm dragon dominated by Rudra. In a manner starkly different from before, like a lion overpowering a rabbit, Rimuru effortlessly devoured the storm dragon in a one-sided display of dominance. Thus, the intense battle came to a quiet conclusion. Having absorbed the storm dragon, Rimuru underwent a successful evolution and rebirth, radiating a dazzling, blessed light. Once a slime, Rimuru now took on a human form, wielding a blade, unclothed. He was slightly taller than before, standing at about 160 centimeters, appearing to be around 15 or 16 years old. His hair, a blend of blue and silver with streaks of white, and golden eyes reminiscent of a dragon's, shone with a divine presence. His pale skin glowed as black and gold miasma wrapped around his body, gradually forming into a sleek black full-body suit. Suppressing his newfound immense power, Rimuru smiled contentedly. Thus, the storm dragon was devoured and freed, and Rimuru ascended as the fifth true dragon in this world, the dragon demon Viscous Star Divine Body, also known as the ultimate slime. Although a subspecies, he had indeed reached the pinnacle of the world. Rimuru had achieved his goal in a flawless manner. Alright, that's all for this video. In our next episode, we will continue to delve into the latter half of the battle between Rimuru and Velgrynd, detailing how Rimuru manages to subdue the Scorched Dragon Velgrynd and how crazily strong of Manus Ciel. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.